Alrighty, welcome aboard, everybody. Thank you for joining us today here on the second edition of the HL Flake Security Professionals Business Roundtable. Excited to be back with you this Thursday, and we've got a lot of fun topics to talk about today, hopefully to help you with your business and through your business strategies in the current situation that we're all dealing with right now throughout the world. My name is Chad Lingefelt from Lockdock Security. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we've got a great roundtable of guests today with us. So we'll start kind of in my top left, which is Tony Hokanson. Tony, you want to give us a little bit of an introduction? Tell us who you are and where you're from.
I think you're on mute, Tony.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Tony.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Tony Hokanson with Bloomington Security Solutions in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We own a couple other companies as well, Minneapolis Lock and Key and Assured Security. We are actually in the process of going through a brand change. All of the Bloomington Security name will be going away and we'll be becoming Assured Security, serving the whole Minnesota area. So.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today, Tony. Excited to have some conversation with you and get some of your input on the topics today. Also over to my right is Mr. Lars Johnston. Lars, welcome all the way from Canada. Thank you for joining us today. Give us a little bit of introduction.
Sure. Lars Johnson with Calgary Lock and Safe in Calgary, Alberta. That is probably north of wherever you're sitting right now. It's in a little country called Canada. We are very similar to you guys, except we just have different colored money. And you'll notice I talk proper English. I don't talk about vehicles. Anyway, our security company is, as I said, Calgary Lock and Safe. We have about 55 team members, handle mostly commercial security. Locksmith services related, but also doors, frames, operators, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. And down in the bottom left-hand corner, I see Christy there. Christy, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you, Chad.
Thank you for being back with us today. Give us a little bit of introduction for those that may not have been on the video last week.
Sure. I'm with HL Flake Security Hardware. I've worked for them for a few years down here in Houston. I just got a giggle out of Lars about, because that was proper English. I can't even do it right. But yeah, down here in Houston, so I feel like at some point I'm going to say y'all, and I'm not even from Texas. I'm from Illinois. But I will say it, and we'll see how many times. But that's a little bit about me, and yeah.
Well, I will go ahead and put a y'all counter on my piece of paper here. We'll keep an ear out.
Appreciate it.
And we'll also add an added note on there, if Lars uses y'all, then we'll just stop the entire meeting altogether.
Absolutely.
Bottom right-hand corner from St. Louis, Missouri, Mr. Ted Beischer. How you doing, Ted?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you for being here today. Why don't you give us a little bit of introduction to yourself and your business?
Sure. With Beischer Lock and Security. We do traditional locksmithing and electronic security. We also have an audio, video, and home automation division. Currently have 23 employees, and we are in St. Louis, Missouri.
Cool. Well, we appreciate you being here. So last week we had some conversation about what exactly was happening with the world right now from the coronavirus and COVID-19 and how it was impacting our business. And today we wanted to kind of continue that conversation with some different perspectives, some different viewpoints, but also kind of get into a little more detail on some of the things that we started talking about last week. So anybody that's watching right now on YouTube or Facebook, we're on the HL Flake page on both of those. Feel free to share that. Click the share icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Send a text message out. Communicate this out to your social media. I think anybody that's in the industry or anybody that's in small business in general could get value out of the conversation that we're getting ready to have today. And so we want to continue to invite folks into that conversation. So really glad to have you here. I see C&D Locksmith is logged in on the YouTube page and checking us out here. So thank you very much for being here. Kind of the topics that I wanted to talk about today, I'll just kind of outline those here at the beginning just so people will understand where we're headed. Number one, we're going to talk about some measurables, some KPIs, some metrics, some things that each business is kind of looking at to understand how their business is doing. So understanding kind of the health of their business. We want to talk about layoffs. What is the outlook? What are some things to consider? Is that something that's happening in our industry, and is it something that we need to be mindful of? The Payroll Protection Program, PPP as it is affectionately known, how is that being impacted? Has anybody utilized it? Has anybody had any success with it? Leadership, talking about how we're communicating with our employees, how we're communicating with our companies, and what we're seeing in that aspect. Any marketing messages to our customers and what that looks like. And then another point of topic is market diversification. How is your business structured, and how have you seen that impacted if you were heavily in one area of a market, maybe heavily in automotive or heavily in residential? Have you seen that as a dramatic drop-off versus somebody that may have more of a diversification in all of the different type of clients that you serve? So that's kind of the topics that we're going to jump into today and get some feedback from these folks. Again, diverse areas of the country and roles and responsibilities, so I think it'll be a fun conversation. So with that, let's jump into measurables and KPIs. I'll jump to Lars first because I know he is all about some KPIs and metrics, but get us a little bit of idea. What are you looking at on a day-to-day to kind of measure the health of your business?
We've actually started looking a lot closer on a day-to-day basis. I mean, traditionally, just for some context here, my role is more looking at month to month, even quarter to quarter, rather than day to day. But with the dramatic impact, I mean, of the last 3 weeks, March 15th was kind of the beginning for us. That was when our state of emergency came into play in our province. One of the key things that we are looking at is dispatches created. So I'm going to use the term ESC, but whatever CRM you're using, ESC is the program that we use. And we started looking at our demand on a day-to-day basis, just how many dispatches that are created every day. So that's like a service ticket or whatever your vocabulary is. We were averaging, I look at an average of about 6 to 9 months. And we're averaging about 57 or 58 calls a day. Since March 15th, that average has gone down to about 23. So that's well over 50%. That's a pretty easy KPI to trend. We've started graphing it out. Actually, looking at spreadsheets and databases, it doesn't seem to have that same kind of kick and that impact. But as soon as we put it in a graph, just simple Excel, dumped it in there, it kind of looks like an EKG. And then we have a line that goes across the middle. And it shows us anything that is under the average, which has been 15 of the last 16 business days, has been a pretty good indication that things are changing. So it's service requests demanded per day is what we're focusing on right now, as well as a variety of other things, but I'll maybe stop at that for a second.
So service calls demanded per day is a main number that you're looking at and paying attention to. And you're
just Chad, just having trouble with your microphone here.
Yeah, can't hear you.
Well, that's cool. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
So you're watching your average number of service calls, and that has dropped over 50%. But that is, and you're measuring that based off of basically the demand for service calls per day. That's kind of how one of the major components that you're watching for your business right now.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Cool.
It's demand per day. So we're trying to get an understanding of what the need for our services truly demand. So we're monitoring how many dispatches were created, but also the input that's coming. So phone calls a day, emails received a day. Not that that's a direct correlation, but it does give and imply what there is a tie between phone calls you receive, emails you receive, and the amount of demand that is created. Gotcha. So we're looking at those three combined.
Understood. I'll go to Ted next to kind of understand what they're looking at, and then I'd be very interested, Christy, from HL Fleet's perspective, what kind of KPIs and metrics that you guys are watching as kind of the health of your business.
Yeah, so We've taken a lot of information from Lars and duplicated it. We are watching our daily, we don't have any historical data for service calls or calls coming in, but we have started tracking it as of this week. So between the shop and our dispatcher, they report every day how many calls came in, and of those calls, how many turned into actual billable hours or dispatches. We've also been keeping an eye on, we have a retail store. So we've been keeping an eye on the retail store and logging how many people come in and at what times to see if there's any correlation there. Business has, as everybody knows, severely slacked off. We've also been watching, our inventory and the regular day to day. We used to look at this monthly, then it went to weekly, and now it's daily.
Very good, very good. So Ted, let me ask you a question. So you just said you kind of had borrowed some of those ideas and learned some of those lessons from Lars through a lot of conversations that we've been having. My question for you is, now that you're doing that, because you mentioned you didn't have historical data, so I think a big takeaway from there is it's never too late to start, just in a quick, simple thing. Here's the phone calls we're getting, the service calls we're putting in. But do you think that will be something that you'll continue on? Is that a kind of a new rhythm that you guys will be applying as you move forward in business, or do you think it's just for right now?
No, absolutely. We're going to continue this. There's a lot I've learned during these conversations, a lot of good information, and they're simple, easy changes that can have drastic consequences.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ted. Christy, I want to jump over to you, and then Tony, we'll kind of hear what you guys got going on up in Minnesota.
Yeah, for sure. So just like you guys, we track sales per day. So it might be demand based off your calls. For us, it's, orders taken, right? So we're definitely tracking our sales per day. We've been doing that for years. So we've got tons and tons of data to track against and see how this is impacting us. And that's getting distributed to the decision makers on a daily basis to see where we need to adjust, what we need to do. One item that we've changed a little bit and sort of focusing on more is our outbound or our inbound call ratio. So we have a target of how many calls we want to answer per day, right? And we've been focusing on that for the last year as we learn from feedback from our customers during surveys. But now with a little bit more time on our hands because the inbound calls have dropped, we're actually now switching and targeting our outbound calls per day as another KPI. And we're making outbound calls to our customers, more so letting them know, hey guys, we're still open, we're still here for when you need us. Let us know what you need, maybe announcing some of the different activities we have going on, but whatever we feel needs to get communicated. Now that's a different KPI for us as opposed to the normals, like on time and full delivery and or sales.
Gotcha. So some of the new ones that you've implemented based off of the current activities or current situation that we're in.
Right.
Very cool. Tony, up in Minnesota, what kind of metrics are you guys looking at to understand the health of your business?
Yeah, so one of our original goals this year was to try to develop more KPIs and metrics, and this has definitely put an importance on that. One thing that we're looking at similar to Lars is inbound service calls. Actually, one of our accounts receivable people, they just started pulling service tickets without even being asked, and we started looking at the calls when COVID was happening. Now we've actually created a daily scorecard for not only service calls, but AR collected, cash collected, service amount invoiced. So kind of looking at some of the financial pieces that come alongside those service calls and just trying to get a daily monitor on what's going on. We don't have good historical data on that yet. We do in our accounting systems, but as far as this collection sheet, so I'm really curious to see what happens after a couple of weeks, and then we'll start modeling that data and develop some trends. But I think, the two most important things, like Lars said, one, KPIs on what's coming in, but then also, are we getting collected on these customers? One thing, we've definitely seen a slowdown in the incoming calls, or service calls per day. We've seen a drop about probably 20%, 20-30%, so not quite as large as what's going on up in Canada. We have actually seen, we don't have any good metrics around this, but we have seen still a decent amount of project requests, which has been nice. People still looking to do things, just maybe not at the quite as fast of a rate as before.
So Tony and Ted specifically, because I know you just mentioned that these are new things that you have started through this process, and you don't have a lot of historical data in some of those areas. how is that going to change your business moving forward? I know Ted said that's going to be kind of a new norm. That's going to be something you're going to be watching. But I guess my question is, if you had not implemented that now, what would your process be for monitoring and understanding where your business was right now today when things changed? Ted, Tony, whichever one you want to jump in first.
So in the past, we had always looked at kind of like you said, a monthly snapshot, quarterly snapshot, yearly snapshot, and specifically on the sales standpoint after the fact. I think what this is going to give us is a lot more proactive insights into what's going to happen. And I really like having the daily measurement of, again, okay, here's what's happened today, here's how this is going to affect us in 30 days, and might actually even help us in some staffing and some training initiatives that, we can kind of project into the future, and just give us more visibility into what's to come. I think COVID has placed a huge emphasis on that, to just make sure that we pay attention to, not only what's happening now, but what's the world going to be like 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, and that sort of thing.
So I see a comment in the chat. What kind of CRM software is everybody using to track customer information, customer purchases, and other customer-related information? So just go around the table real quick. Tony, what are you guys using?
We're currently using a software called Kickserve. We're actually in the process into migrating into an opening management system from you guys to help us with tracking doors and service tickets and that sort of thing. So we're kind of in the middle of changing systems. We've used Kickserve for 2-3 years. It's a nice online web-based portal, but we're looking to move towards something that gives us a little more tracking and a little bit more of these KPIs. So,
Lars, what are you guys using?
ESC.
ESC?
It's called. Electronic Service Cloud, I think, is the acronym. It's the software-based version of Field Edge. Field Edge is also pretty common. I think ESC is probably the most common software in the industry.
Awesome.
That's what we've been
And Ted, what are you guys using?
a few years now.
We're using ESC as well.
ESC, okay.
Yeah.
And then Chris, if it's applicable, what kind of software do you guys use to manage your stuff?
Yeah, I don't know that it's quite applicable because we're a little bit different of a business model. So we use GP, and then we've got certain CRMs that integrate with that. So
there you go.
Not for certain if it's quite applicable.
So Kickserve, ESC, we have our own software that we developed in house. There is several other. I've heard of Tiger Paw is another kind of a dispatch software. So there's a lot of them out there. Service Manager, I think, is another one. Service Fusion. Yeah, there's a lot of different software out there, just depending on your size of your business and exactly what you're trying to monitor. So Tony, you just said that you kind of did this on a month-to-month basis, and that's how you would have understood that, but you may not have known it until 30 days after the fact. Ted, what would you guys have typically done in the same situation, running into something like this, and then being able to figure out what a slowdown looks like?
Historically, I guess at least a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was solely responsible for looking at the numbers. Didn't have really a management team or a leadership team to go over these. Like I said, I guess a year and a half, 2 years ago, we've developed that within our company and started, measuring more KPIs for certain things. And it's really helped out. If you haven't done it, take the time, do it, set small goals. And it's been a great eye opener to us and the entire team. It helps us move along and see where we're lacking, and sales numbers or quotes put it out, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, and that's I think that's a major takeaway. You can start very small, very simple, just start tracking something, but I think the typical model for all of us has been to look in the past and see what we did versus understanding where we are from a day-to-day basis. I think very similar to you guys, we're monitoring the calls coming in, the site visits coming in per day, tracking the number of emails, and then the other one is tracking our new opportunities, so the number of quotes that are being created in a given day, and that'll continue to help us understand what that's going to look like 30, 60, 90 days down the road, instead of hoping what's going to happen or hoping for a turnaround. We'll be able to have a better idea of when to project for it. Lars, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I would be disgusted with myself if I didn't mention the word cash flow. It is the metric that very few small businesses pay attention to. They look at sales. We're all talking about sales and demand and that kind of thing. And sales are great, but if you don't actually get paid for it and your receivables balloon and you continue to pay out, you're going to run dry on cash. And cash flow, I'd like to take this isn't live, thankfully, so we'll just erase what I said before and just focus on cash flow.
No, this is live, Lars. This is Lars.
Oh, this is live. Oh, perfect. Yeah, but the cash flow is first and foremost number one that we're looking at, and that's what has driven us to get to this day-to-day kind of demand KPI that we're looking at.
Most
cash
definitely.
is king, Chad.
Yes, cash is king. That's what I've heard. The accounts receivable is definitely something to keep your mind on and your eyeballs on, because as that continues to grow, that's going to be a difficult thing in your business. Anything else that anybody would like to add on the metrics or measurables category before we move on to the next topic?
Receivables, inventory, payables. Those are the three things. Pay attention to those three.
So I'm going to add one that's not a typical KPI, but something that we're watching, and it's kind of off topic, but on topic, because if you come to the HL Flake site, you'll know one of the things I focus on is safety. And I run HR and finance, so I think it's the HR side of my hat. And one thing right now we're tracking that's brand new is close contact log. So if any of our employees come into close contact with somebody else, a customer, a vendor, within 6 feet for a frequent or prolonged period of time, we are now tracking that as well. And I think just for measures of safety, I think it's a great thing to add. Not, a financial indicator for us, but it will definitely help keep our employees safe, which is one of the number one things.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. On that.
One
Chad,
other thing.
Sorry, Tony.
I was just going to say one other thing I've actually learned from Lars that he's mentioned before is, and something that we're trying to work on is really getting an individual number for people in organizations to come back to. So whether you work in accounts receivable and you're looking at the cash collected in a day, whether you're looking at inventory and it's a daily inventory number, whether you be in a sales and number of quotes put out, get people in your organization numbers that they can be looking at. Again, we're not at that point yet. It's something we're working towards, but I think that's great advice, that just to make sure that people have something they can identify and monitor daily. And it's just important.
Most definitely. So let's move on to the next category, which is talking about layoffs, and we can probably group layoffs and PPP together as a category. But what are the things that you're looking at from a layoff perspective? Is that something that you have had to consider? Is it something that's come up in conversation? And also the payroll protection program, are you looking at that in that aspect? Well, let's start with Ted.
Yes, as of yesterday, we have informed our guys that we are going to be furloughing some people. The business, the locksmith side is down. The electronic side is almost non-existent. There's plenty of work out there, but nobody wants us around. Nobody wants us in their houses. Places have shut down. They're not letting vendors, anybody outside the company into these facilities. So that has really killed us. We did apply for the PPP, have not heard back from the bank. Well, I've heard from the bank, but we have not been approved or anything like that. It seems to be a struggle in that regards.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the guys took it well and understood where we were coming from and what we needed to do. It was really the toughest thing I've had to do.
Yeah, most definitely. Tony, what are your thoughts on this? And I know you've applied for the PPP as well. What are the progress that you've heard on this?
Yep, we've applied for the PPP. From talking with our banker, it sounds like we've gotten some sort of an approval number, whatever that means. Haven't heard any words on what the next steps will be on that. We're hoping to find out more shortly. We haven't laid anybody off. We've been using this time in the downtime to focus on some projects internally that we've been trying to get done over the last 6, 12, 18 months. So really just kind of reallocating some resources and putting them towards other uses. So that way when when this all ends, we can come out strong. We're kind of monitoring the situation day by day, but we have a lot of projects to work on, and I'm just so far just trying to remain positive and keep going and doing what we can be doing. And yeah, so at this point, we haven't laid anybody off.
Gotcha. Christy, what are you guys seeing in Texas?
Well, between COVID-19 and the oil crisis right now as well, we're seeing some really down numbers. So unfortunately, we did have to take some measures, and it was a really tough decision. So we did have to lay off a couple people here and there.
Yep.
Never easy. So I feel for you, Ted. It is one of the toughest conversations you'll ever have to have, and the best we can hope for is that this turns around and, quickly, and we can get those people that, back in their roles. So.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. Lars, I know you guys have had this conversation as well. What's the situation there?
Well, we've, as crazy as this sounds, I had a meeting with my partners Tuesday morning at 9:15 or 8:15, sorry. And we had a plan for how we were going to move forward. And we put some thought into what we would call the essential services within our company that was needed, because our revenue literally dropped in half with like a snap of a finger. Overnight, it dropped. So we had a meeting at 8:15, and by 10 o'clock, it had completely changed. So your version of PPP, we have a few different programs. I'm not sure how many Canadians are watching, but I will mention the CERB, that's Canadian Emergency Response Bursary. That is for staff and people specifically. There's the CEBA, Canadian Emergency Bank. I'm not sure. That's the one where there's actual lending from the federal government. That's a forgivable loan to a certain extent. And then there's the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. So those are three programs that have come out since Tuesday that are dramatically changing the way we're planning. So we're, rather than meeting weekly with our GM and our partnership group, we're actually meeting every day. And it's just, we're not scheduling calls. It's just, hey, are you available? Phone call, web chat, continuing on that way, because we have gone from a staff of 57 to a staff of 31 in 10 days. So yeah, it's not even a day by day thing. It's honestly an hour by hour thing up here. It's just having everyone paying attention to the information that is out there and planning based on what you can for right now, and being ready to change that in an hour if you have to.
Most definitely. So things are happening and changing very rapidly. There's obviously in America, there's some programs that are available. I think the general consensus across all small business right now is that it's the offerings that they have available are not easily accessible at the current moment, whereas it sounds great in theory, but there's still a process and a time period, and it's not going to be anything quick and immediate. And so I think, I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I know from our perspective, it was this thing as we were walking into it thinking that it was going to be something quick and it was going to become available quickly and readily available. And that obviously is changing the tone very, very quickly. So it's just a continual conversation of what does this look like? How are we going and how are we progressing? Yes, go ahead, Lars.
Sorry, I was going to say, so Chad, even on that note, in our world, our federal government has posted details to be announced. So our strategy has been effectively is we're talking upstream with our suppliers and just saying, we are going to make these payments. Generally speaking, our suppliers are larger companies than us, and they, we've been a good customer of ours, and they understand where we're coming from. Everyone's in the same boat. So we've just had these conversations. Said, listen, we're not in trouble now, but we don't want to be in trouble, and so we're waiting to hear what the government has to say about these and a release date specifically. And they've all been under the same, we get it. That makes sense. So that's really lessened the pressure on us. The other avenue we took is we've been talking to our bank, and right now I can't speak to the American banks, but the Canadian banks, they're They just basically throw up their hand and say, hey, if you can, if you have money, great. And if not, don't worry about it. We don't know what this looks like. We don't really have a plan yet, but we'll do whatever we can to keep you in business.
Sure.
And that was a message right from March 15th. Absolutely must call your banker, talk to them, talk to your accountant, because they're usually the front line. External accountants are usually the front line to know what programs are coming out, because everything does have a tax implication. Nothing's free, but those are absolutely the first calls to make.
Most definitely. So there's a lot of variation, obviously, and I think that's one of the really impactful things to understand when you start talking about business as a whole, because we're all in different segments of the country and in two different countries. And so we have such a unique perspective across the board that we can all apply. So maybe if folks that are watching this may see something completely different in their area, maybe their state or their city. And I would imagine there's going to be a great divide even amongst cities and states. So it's really understanding what it is and shoring up kind of those resources at your local level is going to be the main priority and objective for everybody. Is there, Christian, I would imagine that you follow some of this stuff on the PPE side, or PPP side. Have you seen anything, any changes? Have you heard anything different than what has already been discussed?
No, we obviously have been watching it closely, in my peer group as well. So I think the best thing you can do is just, keep checking back at the government site. They have the FAQs. There's still a lot of ambiguity kind of in the forgiveness process of what this is going to actually look like down the road. I think there's still a lot of research and clarification to come out. So just keep your eyes on it. Kind of interestingly, as I was thinking about this call, thinking that we have a lot of sole proprietorships on this call and or 1099ers or whatever it may be. The sole proprietors, they from what I understand, I thought their applications don't start until tomorrow, but they can actually apply now. And then those in the U.S. that, have the 1099s, their applications open up tomorrow. And I was looking online, there's tons of videos out there, people, accountants especially, giving information. And I saw this one, JJ, the CPA, I think it was, kind of entertaining fella, if you want to Google him. I don't know him at all. Can't really vouch for him, but he has some good information for the smaller businesses. So if you're interested, I would just send people that way as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I want to kind of move along. Any other closing thoughts on that before we move on? Go ahead, Tony.
One thing I would add to that, I know you guys talked about this last week on your call, but in case there's any new people, also to look into the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan through the SBA. Again, I know you talked about that last week, but just something else that it's not as forgivable. There are some grants associated with it, but it's also a good form of financing to people to look into that. Again, it's one of those things that's hard to get right now, but it'd be probably good to look into for future and stay on top of it. And the other thing I was going to say is, Large mentioned your accountant and your banker. I would definitely say to reach out to them if you haven't, but also make sure you have a good HR or legal guidance as well through this. There's so many employment laws changing. If you don't have someone you reference for HR consulting or legal advice, I recommend you find someone because it's changing so quickly and there's so much stuff changing. We have a lady that we've used for the last 2-3 years that's been great, and I basically have her on speed dial at this point. I just recommend that people make sure they have someone they're checking with, because there's a lot of new stuff that's coming out from safe and sick time policies and all those stuff. So just recommend that if you aren't talking to an HR person, to start.
Most definitely. On that note, I think it's also very important to reach out to all of your other contacts from if you have any vehicle loans or any lease for your facilities, because I spoke with a commercial real estate broker earlier today, and he said that he was having a lot of those conversations, and he's seeing it on the leasing side that the conversation is being drawn very mutually understanding that everybody is going to have to work together to move through this. So if you haven't already, make sure you ask those questions and start those conversations. I know for us personally, with our organization, we reached out to some folks that are doing some financing on some of our fleet, and they were happy to be able to shift some of those payments towards the end of the lifetime of that financing. So there's opportunities out there. There's possibilities out there. Just don't hesitate to ask. I want to move on to the leadership capacity of the conversation, and I really want to dive in for those that are listening or that are watching this, going, hey, what does this mean? How do I need to communicate with my organization? I've heard outside of our company, some spouses, businesses that they're working for, how they are not hearing anything from their company, and they're just kind of, we don't know what's going on. And so I'm interested, because I feel like it's a natural obligation that we're communicating to our team, but I don't know that that's the natural case for everybody. So from a leadership perspective, what are you communicating to your employees? How often are you communicating to your employees? What is that conversation actively looking like right now? And what are the things that you've had to change since this process started? So I want to jump down to Ted, and then we'll go to Lars, just to kind of keep this conversation going.
Sure. We do communicate with our team daily. We have some, the one thing we've never done in the past are these video meetings. So we had to get up to speed on that. We do handle those every day. You can do it with inside the Teams app, and we are keeping them informed daily of what's going on, progress, asking them to, hey, look for work. Look for something that we can do. We've also asked all of our team members if there's anybody that has marketing skills or video skills or anything like that, so we can prepare for the uptick of this, and it will be here. So we have that marketing material out there. We're keeping in touch with them right now, just in the hopes that this is going to end soon.
Most definitely. I think, Ted, you mentioned that a couple of days ago in a conversation we had. It was either yourself or Mark had mentioned. I think that was a really good idea, really talking to your team and saying, okay, if these are the things that we can't do right now, but what are the things that we can do, and what skill sets do you have that we're not normally utilizing, and how can we mutually kind of work together on that? So I think it's a really good thing to think about in these times. Lars, what are your thoughts on the aspect of leadership in these times?
It's one of those things you're not really prepared for, obviously. The leadership just kind of happens. And, the one thing I'm trying to take the positive out of this. It's still terrifying what's happening, and it really is. The other side of that is there's a lot of opportunity to really see what your people are capable of. I love what Ted was talking about. It's amazing when you throw it out there. Man, I wish we could do a video, to say something. And one of the team members says, "Oh, actually, yeah, I used to do that in another job. I could do that." And you're just blown away at the capabilities of the rest of your team. So having that conversation, I really struggled when this first happened. If we went back, say, 3 weeks, I had a conversation with. I hate to do this publicly, Chad, but I was speaking with Chad, and I was really struggling with how much transparency I wanted to go with, and it was because the information was changing so quickly. I felt like I would say one thing, and then it would start getting through the organization, but then it would change, and I was contradicting myself constantly. So I didn't want to say anything. And Chad referenced a book, and I don't remember which. We said basically in times like this, the approach he's taking is over communication, over transparency. And I thought about that and thought, what the heck? I'm showing a little bit of vulnerability and just saying, I really don't have a clue. I don't have the answers, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm going to tell you the strategy of the company, and I'm going to give it my best. So what we've done that has received incredible feedback from our group is at the end of every day, we use Slack internally. So it's just an internal messaging system. I send an announcement to everyone in the company, and it follows the same guidelines every day. First and foremost, it's a thanks to everyone that is working together to make this possible. It's always a thank you, because honestly, I'm sitting at home. I'm not at the highest risk level of our guys that are still out in the field doing what they can, and we depend on them. And we have a support team and our community, and we talk about the feeling of safety. That's what our company provides, is a feeling of safety. And so it's the greater good, and it's kind of the rallying cry that you can tell by the messages and the feedback we get that our team is really coming together. And we are better as a team and a culture right now than we've been in 10 years, because everyone is rallying behind this common enemy. So we talk about the feeling of safety, and then follow it up with policy change. So we have a wellness procedure, a COVID-19 wellness procedure that everyone follows. Includes, it's essentially spray in, spray out, what we call it. So we clean doors when we get there. We clean doors after we leave. We wear gloves. We wash our hands after everything, and don't touch your face. That's the nuts and bolts of our wellness procedure. It's just an outline that we reference every day. We give to our customers so they know what we're doing. And then quickly change to the benefits. So this is all like 3 or 4 paragraphs. It's very short. Talk to the benefits. So any of the programs that are available, any of the health benefits that you can use that the company pays for. And then just a quick update on COVID-19. The reason why I do that, I try not to focus on the negatives, but there is so much information out there, good, bad, and otherwise. The frustration is you will read or hear something from a source that just doesn't have the credibility. And so the message that we say every day, I finish every announcement every day with educate yourself, no unnecessary risks, and flatten the curve. And it's the same message every day. And then I put the source that is our government website, that is the Chief Health Officer of the province of Alberta. And this is all coming from her, because I want people to use facts, not opinions. Focus on the facts, stay educated, stay safe. And the amount of feedback that I've had internally from this method is more than I've got in the 8 years of doing this.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about all of that is once you ramp up your communication in times of crisis, what is the new rhythm? And it kind of goes back even to the KPIs and metrics. What is the new rhythm that you're going to work off of as you move forward? Tony, we'll come to you next to kind of get your thoughts on the changes in leadership, or maybe how you've had to adapt in this process and how you're communicating with your team. But I do think that it is interesting in every one of these scenarios so far. It's creating a new rhythm, a new process, and then what are we looking at on the outside of this? Are we going to go back to the way we were, or are we going to be able to apply some of these things moving forward? Tony, how are things from your perspective?
Yeah, so one thing I was going to say is I was actually going to touch on normalcy, and you kind of just hinted at it there, is we've been trying to, try to just develop some sort of normalcy. People are used to being in a rhythm. They don't like stuff changing every day, and unfortunately stuff is changing every day. And one thing I've been saying to our team lately the last couple of days is we seem to have settled into a new norm. It's a much different norm than we were at a long time, or a couple months ago, but it is a new norm, and we're trying to at least develop some sort of consistency. With that, we're also trying to still do some of the stuff that we used to do, which is all company meetings. So we had our all company meeting last week, and we did it through a conference call format, which is the first time we've ever had to do that. But I think that was really good, just to keep that normal thing. We have a meeting the first Wednesday of the month. Everyone dialed in. And what we did at the end of it was to just have everyone go around and say one good thing that's come out of COVID, one silver lining. And it was actually very valuable just to focus on the positive. I myself try to always remain positive and be optimistic. And I think it's good to keep that in mind, that out of this, we are going to develop new processes and new norms that are going to be good. Another thing we've been focusing on with communication is just being intentful and making sure that we are doing that communication. I think before we kind of just did it, when it was convenient, and now it's not convenient at all because people People are home. People are working remote. I haven't been to our main office in Bloomington for almost a month, but I've been very intentful about making sure to call employees, communicate with employees, ask them how things are going, just kind of check their temperature on what's going on with the situation. And we've been encouraging our leadership team to do the same, and really everyone to just kind of check in on employees. Now more than ever, I think it's important for people to delegate and rely on their team to solve problems, and I think that goes back to communication as well. But just we can't physically gauge everyone's temperature. We have 43 employees. I can't call all 43 employees every day, but it's important to delegate to your team members and let them know that we're thinking about them and that we're planning for them, and engage their opinion, engage their reaction. They're out in the field working. And I just want to make sure that we're getting their feedback, because they're seeing a totally different world than what we're seeing. So,
yeah, creating opportunities to hear from your team as well as communicate the consistency so that everybody understands the objectives and perspectives. Christy, what has been the changes with HL Flake and on a totally different scale?
It's been fun, as much as I can say fun as it can be. We were actually talking just the other day that this is creating, for the leadership team itself, so much more trust within the group, because we're all being pulled in a million directions, and it's kind of like we're being very candid with one another. We're asking for exactly what we need, when we need it, and setting priorities. And I think that's huge for us as a leadership team, but that's trickling down into the other teams as well. So I think that's one thing. Obviously, like the rest of you, we're communicating, very frequently. So Mark is sending weekly emails, and then we post those on our Paylocity site. So Paylocity is our payroll provider. But what I love about it is it's got like an internal, it's called Community. It's a Facebook, but for only the employees of the company. And so it creates a feed, and there's different groups within that. And so we also post our announcements there, which works really well for a lot of our employees that are in the warehouse. They don't have an email, so they can't see an email. So this has become extremely, extremely valuable in these times, because now all of our employees can see any written messages, and we can also post video updates as well, which is, obviously needed right now. What's kind of bloomed out of that is one of our associates at our sister company, IKS, who were on the same feed. She started a Corona amusement group. And so what's going well in your day? What can we have, just message of positivity. It might be a kid spinning around in the office chair at home, whatever it is, just something that brightens your day. And so I think that's one huge takeaway. If I can encourage any one of you, always start the meetings with something positive, because there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of aspects that look doom and gloom and whatnot, but we will come out of this. We will come out stronger. We're going to come out a better team. And so we're always trying to put the positive message. And that's one thing that Mark does really well in his written communications, is starting with a win. Where did we have a win this week or this day? And that is beautiful to focus on, and then focusing on the future wins. I think that's just as huge as well.
I think it's interesting, and just from experience being around the industry for the past 15 or 16 years, I think it's very typical for our industry to have a high level of cynicism, to be a little cynical, because we are constantly working and fixing other people's problems. And so it's not a normal or a regular thought process to go to the positives first. And so I would issue that out as a challenge to our entire industry, especially right now. Find the positives. Be intentional. This was a message to our leadership team the other day. Be intentional about finding the positives, because it's easy for us to point out all the negatives very, very quickly. These are the negative things that are happening. These are the things that are going wrong. These are the things that we can't do. But if you start with the positives, find positive ways to, be intentional about looking for those positives and highlighting those. It's going to make everybody's day a lot better and easier to deal with. So anything else, any other thoughts on leadership that we missed out on, or anything else we wanted to add?
Well, Chad, I would throw in there, we've all kind of mentioned it, but it's, we talked about video voice versus voice, and where normally you walk around and see people and you chat and you're in the office and that kind of thing. And, 3 weeks ago, we probably didn't do, a video chat ever. That was it was uncomfortable. Now it's the new normal. Like video chat, you pop in. There's all kinds of apps, but the personal connection from a video versus just a phone call is 1,000 times. If you're not doing video chat right now, absolutely should. You can use it in Slack, you can use Ring Central, you can use Zoom, there's House Party, there's FaceTime, there's a bunch of different ones. Doesn't matter. Pick one and use it. It's infinitely better than just voice.
Most definitely. Good add-on. I know we're kind of pushing up towards an hour mark, so I want to be mindful of that. One of the ideas that we had talked about was marketing messages to customers. I want to skip past that, and I really want to talk about market diversification, because I think this is one of the things as an industry that some of us are struggling with in different areas. The structure of your business, the clients that you serve, based off of the diversification that you have. So what I'm saying with that is if you're heavily in automotive or heavily in residential, and those things just cut off, it's like a water faucet and it just shuts off all of a sudden. What are your other ways to adapt and pivot? What are the other markets that you can serve? So I want to get some thoughts on that. Is kind of how your business is split up, how you've seen those different segments impacted, and what are your thoughts on making sure that you're keeping that very diversified, especially now, but as you move forward. Anybody can be free to jump in on that to get started.
I'll start out. We have a pretty diverse business. We do pretty much everything in the aftermarket. So we do residential locksmithing, we do safe work, we do commercial property managers, commercial locksmithing, we do multifamily locksmithing, we do commercial electronic security. We kind of do a little bit of everything, doors and frames, handicap operators. Just saying it is kind of a mouthful and complex. But and it's one challenge that we have in our business is kind of streamlining all of those things. But I think now more than ever, I'm kind of thankful we have all those different diverse businesses. And one thing we're doing is really trying to take a look at which businesses are affected most during this, and almost using it as an opportunity to look at, okay, where's our business going to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now? I just had a conversation this morning with one of our employees about, what's our business going to look like 15 years from now, and what's still going to be around, and where should we be focusing on? And it's kind of weird to think about that far in the future, but I think some of the changes that are happening right now are going to have long-lasting effects on people. Are going to go to the office less. People might. I just saw something this morning that they recommended that you never shake hands again, which is just a weird thing to think about. But I think now more than ever, it's important to think about how is our business going to change and what's it going to look like in the future, and take another look at diversifying a little bit.
Yeah, it was awkward yesterday. I walked up to somebody and shook their hand, and as soon as it happened, we both stared at each other like, what have we just done? It's like immediately running to hand sanitizer. But it's a natural reflex that you have, and now you're having to break that and change it. So there's going to be some new normal associated with it. All your faces just like oh my God, what just happened? But yes, it was true. I think it's very, very interesting. So thinking about future-proofing your business from or as best as possible from a diversification standpoint is a good thing, a good exercise to go through. Ted, what are you seeing from that aspect from your business diversity? I know you have kind of two separate arms of your business, but what does that look like for you guys?
Well, regarding what we have going on now, the electronic security side is pretty much nothing anymore. We have diversified just a little bit. We started supplying churches with video streaming for mass since we were in the AV side. It was a quick learning process. We're still marketing it, but I think we've done 3 or 4 churches that are, happy about that. And it can also be used in the future when this is all over for people who can't make it to church but still want to attend mass. That's really about it. Other than that, we're struggling and trying to look for whatever we can.
It was, and for you guys, that was kind of a very easy pivot, or an easier pivot, because you were already in the AV world for a part of your business, and so it was just kind of learning a new component of that, which was a definite good move, and it provides a great value to a completely different market. Lars, what do you guys see from a diversified market standpoint?
Well, for once, the procrastination and maybe laziness kind of worked out for us. We've been talking about focusing specifically on commercial for years and just cutting residential and cutting automotive. Just never got comfortable with pulling the trigger on that. And now it's turning out to be our commercial. No one's leaving their house, so no one's actually going to work. So there are no commercial requests coming in. We are still seeing some residential. What we're trying to do is advertise at some niche markets. One of them I've talked about. We're about to roll out an Operation Thank You, aimed at first responders specifically. Anyone that is on the front line, basically we'll do whatever we need to do something nice for them. It does keep some of our guys somewhat busy. That's the hope. But just a thank you to the community in general, as we all are trying to take care of ourselves right now. We're moving to lots of hands-free stuff. Are you ever going to open your door with your hands anymore? Are you going to move to an app? That kind of thing. We've talked about operators quite a bit, or automatic doors and wave to open. How many bathrooms in restaurants, when they do open again, how many bathrooms are going to be okay with, or restaurants going to be okay with their bathrooms being pushed open. We've had a couple strange pivots that I'd like to say was planning and it all came together, but we just answered the phone. But we've had a couple customers asking that we install plexiglass or Lexan or that over top of their security entrances, just to remove that risk. So we've actually installed a few of those now, which is, we don't have a clue what we're doing, but we've figured it out. The biggest maybe change we've had, we've gotten fat and lazy, excuse the expression, but we've gotten fat and lazy as a business. We just answer the phone. That's really all we have to do as far as work for sales go these days. Just answer the phone. Yeah. Oh, you need something? Sure, we can do that for you. That's kind of the way we've gone. So actually going out and selling is almost like a challenge for us. But the thing we have been looking at right now is one of the nice things, a silver lining of COVID, is there aren't people leaving their houses, which means there are a bunch of empty buildings around. And if there's empty buildings, you can get a lot more work done. So what we've been talking about is we've been reaching out to the major property managers that we work with that, have the 50, 60 story buildings and say, hey, for instance, your key system is a real mess. Why don't you let us go in and do an audit for you and tell you what you need? You don't have to spend the major dollars to upgrade it right now, but while there's no one there, we can do this at an effective and affordable price because there's no one in the building. And here's our procedures and we follow our wellness thing, and that generally qualms it. But we've really started focusing on doing security audits and really highlighting, hey, there's no one around. We don't have to, we're trying to do stuff on the door and there's no one walking through the door every 5 minutes. This is going to save us time, which will save you money, so you can plan for when and if you do decide to do something. So that's been really effective for us. We've had 3 or 4 larger projects come down that way. And it was just, all the things that was on your to-do list and all the customers, I meant to reach out to this guy and reach out to this guy and this lady I haven't spoken to. And now is the time to do it. And it's actually working well because we're just making the suggestion and they're saying, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Can you be there tomorrow? It's like, yeah, perfect.
I think that's a very it's a valuable service to offer, and just kind of understanding that it's going to be a lot less stressful on the tenants and the building management and your folks at the same time, your personnel at the same time is going to be less stressful because you're not going to have as many interruptions or disruptions in that process. But I think understanding that as a whole, you mentioned several different kind of opportunities to move into as things start kind of getting back to more normal states, but it is going to change the way that we all interact with our door handles, with our openings as a whole. So I think it's something to be intentional about. I know for our business, years ago, it was very reliant, and this was back when the economy had major struggles back in 15, 16 years ago, and it was very heavily tied to new construction and to upfits. And so the entire business model was really run by rekeys for new upfits, for new tenant move-ins. And then all of a sudden that crashed. And so that entire business was just kind of like, well, nothing's happening. And it was a very interesting and eye-opening experience that the business has continued to understand and adapt as we've gone forward. Not to say we're perfect at it by any stretch, but mindful of diversifying into having some business in K through 12, some in universities, some in healthcare, some in new construction, some in upfit construction, and being just very intentional about where we're at, because when one area dies or one area is struggling, other areas may not be, or they may rise up. You understand right now, healthcare is still kicking. They have all of their facilities over capacitated. You've got manufacturing. There's a lot of manufacturing happening. There's a lot of warehousing happening. And so just understanding where kind of your market segments are located, and you're going to have some opportunity there at least. Christy, what are you guys seeing from that? I know your business is diversified into supplying materials for a specific segment, but as your customers, I guess, are diversified, you'll see those different things happening. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Yeah. Now I was gonna say y'all are our customer. You know, locksmiths and security professionals will continue to be. So we do count on you. So please get diversified if you're not already. I think it's a very smart move. With that, last year we made the intentional move to get a little bit more strategic around access control. We felt we were, not as strong as we could be there. So we invested in some human resources, some people that had some talents there, a little bit more than we already had in the business, that could really help out our customer base. So we're always looking for those opportunities, as well as making sure we've got the right products on hand for your diversification. So making sure that we're stocking the right items. And we actually just got in a really cool tool yesterday. We were trying it out in our warehouse, and I couldn't tell you what it is to save my life, because but it takes your picture when you walk in. It can clock you in. It takes your temperature. It is hands-free. So it's beautiful, because we actually turned off our punch-in time clock, because we don't want people all touching the same time clock, right? And so now you just walk in, it sees your face, it knows who you are, and it takes your temperature and tells you you're okay, which is kind of important these days. So it's just making sure we've got the right things, the right tools, the up-and-coming stuff you'll need. So if there's something we don't, reach out for sure.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. We were having a conversation with one of the groups that we were meeting with the other day, and one of the ideas came up that biometric readers were a big thing, and they still are a big thing, right? Biometric readers. Well, the thing is with biometric reader is you have to touch with your finger, your hand, or something on a particular device. And so we've started to get calls of people going, hold on a second, what do we need to do to revert back to a key fob or a card or a mobile credential, because we don't want to touch these biometric readers anymore, which I would have never guessed to be the case. But again, that's something else to understand. There's a lot of that opportunity that people are going, okay, well, we were really going down this path, and you got to think biometrics is, at least fingerprint or handprint stuff, is probably going to go to the wayside as we move out of this.
Chad, maybe it's a challenging thing to bring up, but something that's very realistic. This is a time of distressed assets. There are going to be, unfortunately, some people that aren't going to make it through on the other side of this. And that is an opportunity for companies with stronger balance sheets, and honestly, just with better luck, to look at some of these distressed assets and add to their portfolios and increase their market share in that manner. If there are going to be people looking to sell what they can and get out of it what they can, and that is something that we haven't actively pursued yet, because we're still trying to get a grasp. But I think in the next probably month, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, you're going to see a lot of companies that weren't, that ran at a thinner cash flow mark, that they're going to need somebody or something to get them out, or just close a shop. So distressed assets is certainly something that is on our radar. Maybe a little distasteful at the moment.
Well, we appreciate the insight and input on that. I do want to be mindful of time. We're right at a little over an hour mark. I appreciate Tony, Lars, Christy, and Ted, all of your insight and input. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to share as we kind of head out of here today? Awesome. Well, encouragement there. We appreciate everybody's perspective and input. I think this is valuable information for any small business, but also for the security industry. I am not exactly sure what the future looks like for this call, but hopefully we've got some continued interest. We never did really get into the marketing messages, so maybe that'll be a future conversation that we can bring some folks in and have a conversation around. But we appreciate that. Again, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, if you're seeing this, share it. It should be posted on the HL Flake page on YouTube and Facebook, and you can share that out and allow those folks, all the other folks in the industry, to be able to see it as well. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for HL Flake for helping to host this and push this out, and we'll see you guys next time.
Great.